was 34 years old when this happened, and at the time I lived in Wichita, Kansas. I worked as a maintenance technician for a company that serviced small markets, gas stations, and remote shops throughout the state. It wasn't a bad job, but there was one part I hated. Some calls happened late at night, especially when a walk-in cooler stopped working or when an electrical system failed in a small place that couldn't wait until morning. That night I had been called to fix an issue at an old gas station in a small town nearly 2 hours from where I lived. I finished the job well after midnight, signed the work order with the manager, grabbed a bad coffee from a machine near the register, and got into my pickup truck to head home. I remember it was cold, but not that heavy winter cold. It was more that dry, biting, early morning Kansas air that goes through your nose and leaves your throat scratchy. The sky was clear, without a strong moon, and everything around seemed too dark because there were almost no lights outside the road. I set the GPS before leaving the station, but after about 20 minutes it lost signal and froze on the screen, as if I were still in the same spot. I knew the route more or less, so I didn't worry much. I just wanted to get home, take a shower, and sleep. The road was one of those rural 2-lane highways surrounded by open fields on both sides with low fences, a few widely spaced trees, and no houses visible for several minutes at a time. I didn't see a single car for quite a while. The sound inside the truck was just the engine, the wind lightly hitting the side and occasionally a small rock popping under the tire. The radio had poor reception, so I left it off. My phone had been without signal for a while, showing only that no service message, and I kept alternating between looking at the road and glancing at the dashboard, mentally counting how much longer it would take to reach somewhere more active. That's when I saw a faint light on the shoulder, far ahead on the right side. At first I thought it was a fence reflector or a small sign, but as I got closer, I realized it was a car stopped at an angle, with the rear almost touching the grass. It was a dark sedan, maybe blue or black, hard to tell in that lighting. The hazard lights weren't on. The driver's door was open, completely open, facing the road. That bothered me immediately because it didn't look like a simple breakdown. It looked abandoned in the middle of something, like someone had gotten out too quickly. I slowed down automatically as I approached, more out of instinct than conscious decision. I passed the car slowly, looking sideways, trying to see if there was anyone inside, but the interior was too dark. I couldn't make out anyone in the driver's seat or the passenger side. The open door swayed slightly, as if the wind were gently pushing it, making a low creaking sound that I could hear even with the windows closed. I kept going another 20-30 meters and looked in the rearview mirror. At that point, the road was completely empty in both directions. No headlights coming from afar, nothing. Just me, that stopped car, and the dark fields around. I thought about continuing and ignoring it, but at the same time came that feeling that if someone really needed help, I'd just be driving away. I sat there for a few seconds with my foot on the brake, stopped in the middle of the lane thinking about what to do. I had no cell signal, so I couldn't even call the police or any emergency service. That weighed on the decision. If someone was hurt there, they probably had no way to call for help. I ended up slowly reversing and pulling over behind the car, leaving some distance. I kept the engine running and the headlights on, pointing directly at the side of the sedan. The light partially illuminated the shoulder and some of the dry vegetation around it. I didn't turn off the truck or open the door right away. I stayed there for a few seconds, just watching, trying to hear something beyond the engine noise. Nothing. No voices, no movement, just the wind passing through the plants and that occasional creak from the open door. Then out of nowhere I saw movement coming from outside the reach of the headlights, farther to the right where it was already fading back into darkness. A figure appeared walking slowly toward the road. It was a woman. I didn't see exactly where she came from. I only noticed her once she stepped into the lit area. She raised one hand hesitantly, like someone trying to get attention without scaring you. When she got closer, I could see she was out of breath, breathing faster than normal and looking straight at me. She stopped a few steps in front of my truck, still partly outside the strongest beam of the headlights. I rolled the window down just enough to hear better, but without exposing myself completely. She spoke first, her voice slightly shaky, like she was trying to stay calm. She said the car had broken down, that she had been trying to start it for a while without success, and that her phone also had no signal. While she talked, I tried to observe everything at once, the way she moved, her clothes, her hands, her face. She looked normal, nothing visibly wrong, but there was something in her behavior that didn't quite fit. It wasn't just nervousness. It was as if she was more focused on keeping me there than actually solving the problem. I asked if there was anyone else with her, and she answered too quickly that there wasn't, that she was alone. That caught my attention right away. The response came almost before I finished asking. Still, at that moment, I was more inclined to believe she was just someone in a bad situation. I said I could try to take a look at the car, see if it was something simple, but that I couldn't promise anything. I opened the truck door but didn't step out completely. I kept one foot still inside, unsure. The cold air hit harder now, and I could smell that dry earth mixed with a faint odor of oil coming from her car. She took a step back when I started getting out, which didn't make much sense. Usually someone asking for help would come closer, not move away. I noticed that immediately, and that was exactly when something shifted in my mind. I lifted my gaze past her car, looking further down the road, and I saw a different kind of shadow in the distance. At first I thought it was just normal darkness, but within a few seconds it became clear. There was another vehicle coming down the road behind me, but its headlights were off, no lights at all. Just a dark shape moving, getting closer, far too silent for the distance it was already at. The moment I realized that, my body reacted before I could even fully process it. I froze for a second, half out of the truck, trying to understand if that made any sense. A car on that road in the middle of the night, completely without headlights. It wasn't normal. And it wasn't just that. The speed didn't seem constant. It was as if it was approaching carefully, quietly, like someone trying not to draw attention. I looked back at the woman, and that's when I saw the change in her. She had stopped talking. She was staring at me, but not with desperation or urgency. It was a more neutral, almost empty look. And slowly, without saying anything, she took another step back, moving away from the headlights back toward the darkness she had come from. That was enough for everything to click in my head at once. It no longer felt like a situation where someone needed help. It felt like I had been placed there. I didn't think twice after that. I got back into the driver's seat immediately and pulled the door shut hard. My heart was racing at a level I hadn't felt in a long time, and my hands were slightly shaking as I put the truck in gear. I still managed to glance at the rearview mirror before taking off. The car behind was much closer now, still without any lights, occupying almost the entire width of the lane. The woman had already stepped almost completely out of my headlights' reach. I couldn't see her face anymore, just a still silhouette. I hit the accelerator without signaling or anything, just pushed the truck forward and started picking up speed. In the first few seconds, I was looking more at the rearview mirror than at the road ahead, trying to see what that car would do. And that's when it became completely clear. The moment I started driving away, the vehicle behind suddenly turned on its headlights, as if there was no longer any reason to hide, and sped up along with me. I drove as fast as I could on that unlit road, still trying to maintain control because any mistake there would mean going off the road. My focus was split between what was ahead and what was behind me, which made everything more tense. The car behind was coming fast, keeping a distance that felt calculated. It didn't get too close, but it didn't stay far enough for me to relax either. Its headlights were now bright and strong, lighting up the entire rear of my truck and creating that shadow effect inside the cabin, like someone was watching me from just behind. I tried to think of some logical way to deal with it. There was no cell signal, no houses, no visible turnoffs on that stretch. All I could do was keep driving. For a few seconds, I considered turning around and heading back toward the station I had just left. But the idea of slowing down or stopping to do that felt like the worst possible decision at that moment. I just wanted to get away as fast as I could. After a few minutes that felt much longer than they actually were, I started to see a light further down the road. It was faint at first, but it grew clearer as I got closer. It looked like a larger intersection, or maybe the entrance to a more active state highway. That gave me some hope, because it meant a chance of finding other cars or some kind of presence. I kept my foot on the gas, trying not to show any hesitation. The car behind me stayed there, steady, without honking or trying to pass, just following. When I finally reached the intersection, I saw a reflective sign indicating a larger road a few meters ahead. Without thinking much, I slowed just enough to make the turn and entered that road. As soon as I turned, I glanced quickly in the rearview mirror. and the car didn't make the same turn. It kept going straight on the previous road, as if it had never intended to follow me beyond that point. I kept driving for several more minutes on that larger road, my whole body still tense as if something could appear again at any moment. Only after a while did I start to see other cars coming from the opposite direction, some trucks, and that was the first thing that truly made me feel a bit safer. Even so, I didn't stop. I didn't pull over, didn't try to go back, didn't do anything except keep going until I reached a slightly larger town that appeared along the way. I stopped at a 24-hour gas station that was open with bright lights, people walking around, the sound of fuel pumps running. It was only there that I turned off the engine and realized how much I was shaking. My hands were sweaty and I took a few seconds just breathing inside the truck before getting out. I went inside, bought a coffee just to have an excuse to stay there, and tried to act normal, but my mind kept going back to that scene. The stopped car, the open door, the woman coming out of the dark, and especially the way she stepped back when she realized I had noticed the other vehicle. The next day, already at home, I kept thinking about whether I should have done something differently. Part of me still wondered if there was some less sinister explanation for all of that, but the more I replayed each detail, the less it made sense as a normal situation. I even looked up local news from that area, trying to see if there had been any reports of attempted approaches or anything similar, but I didn't find anything concrete. Still, that experience completely changed the way I react on isolated roads. I don't stop for anyone in places like that anymore, no matter the situation. It may seem wrong, but after that night, I can't see things like that as simple coincidence anymore. To me, it became very clear that if I had stayed there for a few more seconds, or decided to fully step out of the truck, the story probably would have ended in a very different way. I've never driven that road at the same time again, and honestly, I have no intention of ever doing it. Story 2. I was 29 years old at the time and was driving back from Albuquerque to a smaller town where I lived, near Santa Fe, New Mexico. I worked installing internet systems in rural areas, so it was common for me to be on the road late at night after finishing jobs in more remote locations. On that specific day, I had been stuck in unusual traffic leaving the city because of an accident, and the GPS suggested a shortcut through a dirt road that cut across a very isolated area. I had taken that route once or twice during the day, so I figured it wouldn't be a problem at night. My car was a regular sedan, nothing built for rough roads, but the weather was dry with no recent rain, so I wasn't worried about mud or anything like that. It was close to 11 p.m. when I entered the road. As soon as I left the pavement, it felt like a different world. There was no lighting at all, just my headlights illuminating that narrow strip of dirt and everything else completely dark around me. The road was uneven, full of small rocks and patches of loose dust that lifted as I passed. I drove more slowly than usual, both because of the terrain and the visibility. There were no fences in some areas, just open land, somewhat desert-like with low vegetation and some distant elevations that I could only make out when the headlights caught them from the side. The radio didn't pick up anything, just static, so I turned it off. My phone had also been without signal for a few minutes, which was common there, but it still gives you a bad feeling being completely isolated. I remember glancing at the dashboard a few times just to confirm everything was normal with the car, as if that gave me some sense of control over the situation. For a long time, I saw absolutely nothing but the road. No house lights, no other cars, not even an animal crossing. It was that kind of silence that feels heavy, as if any unusual sound would stand out too much. After about 15 minutes of driving like that, I became more alert because the road had some gentle curves and small rises that blocked the view ahead for a few seconds at a time. It was in one of those sections that I saw something different. At first I thought it was just a log or some object lying in the road because it was right in the middle, completely still. I took my foot off the accelerator and started slowing down gradually. As I got closer, I realized it wasn't an object. It was a person. A man, standing in the middle of the road completely motionless. He wasn't waving, wasn't trying to get attention, wasn't doing anything. He was just there, standing, facing my car. That caused an immediate sense of unease. It didn't make sense for someone to be there at that hour, in that place with no light, no car nearby, nothing. I kept slowing down but didn't come to a complete stop. I kept my foot ready on the brake and leaned slightly forward, trying to get a better look at his face, but the headlights hit him directly and created shadows that made it hard to see details. What I could tell was that he was wearing dark clothes and had his arms down at his sides with no reaction. Not even when the light hit him directly did he move. That was what bothered me the most. Any normal person would raise a hand, step aside, make some kind of gesture. He did nothing. I started thinking quickly about what to do because stopping there didn't seem like a safe option. I even considered reversing, but before I could decide, by reflex I looked in the rearview mirror and saw movement behind my car. At first I only saw a shadow moving low along the road, right in the center, behind me. It took me a second to understand what I was seeing because there were no headlights, no light coming from behind. When the image became clearer, I realized it was another person. Another man. He was moving quickly toward me, coming from the stretch I had just passed seconds before. That made my whole body lock up for a moment. There was no way he could have been there without me seeing him earlier. I had just driven through that section and there had been no one. The road had been completely empty. And now there was a man behind me, and another one standing in front of me, in the middle of the road, as if blocking my path. That's when everything clicked at once in my mind. It no longer felt like a random situation, it felt planned. The man in front didn't move, continuing to stand there, forcing me to slow down even more. The one behind was approaching quickly, closing the distance every second. I felt that drop in my stomach that comes when you realize you made a wrong decision and now don't have much room to fix it. I didn't honk, didn't roll down the window, didn't say anything. I just gripped the steering wheel tightly, thinking of the only way to get out of there without stopping completely. That's when I turned the wheel slightly to the right and noticed that, even though the road was narrow, there was a more compacted strip of dirt along the shoulder, a bit uneven, but passable. I didn't think much beyond that. I pressed the accelerator hard and steered the car to the right, leaving the center of the road and moving onto that rougher stretch. The car started vibrating heavily because of the rocks and holes, but I kept my foot steady. The man in front didn't move until the last second. Only when I was practically passing him did he take a quick step to the side, as if he had been waiting for that exact moment. I couldn't clearly see his face, just the sense that he turned his head to follow the car as I passed. That gave me an even stronger rush of adrenaline. I just wanted to get out of there as fast as possible. As soon as I passed him, I carefully steered the car back onto the main part of the road, still accelerating. My first instinct was to look in the rearview mirror again. The man behind was already much closer to where I had been seconds earlier, and now I could see his movement more clearly. He wasn't running wildly. It was a direct, focused run, like someone who knew exactly what they were doing. And the other man, the one who had been in the road, had fully turned in my direction. For a few seconds, both of them were aligned in my rearview mirror, and then they started to shrink as I gained distance. I kept accelerating without looking back for a while, because it was already difficult to maintain control of the car on that road. I continued driving for several minutes without slowing down, even when the road started to improve slightly. My heart was racing so hard I could feel it in my chest and hands, and I had to focus to avoid making any sudden moves because of the adrenaline. After a while, I started to see a very distant light ahead, something fixed, different from the complete darkness around me. As I got closer, it became clear that it was a small structure, probably a house or some kind of rural property with an outdoor light on. That was the first thing that gave me a real sense that I was getting out of that situation. I didn't stop there, but just seeing a light already changed my breathing a bit. I kept going until a few minutes later I finally reached a paved road again. As soon as I got onto the asphalt, it felt like I had stepped into a completely different environment. The steering became stable, the car stopped vibrating, and I could maintain a steady speed without effort. I kept checking the rearview mirror from time to time, but there was no one behind me anymore. No lights, no cars, nothing. I drove for another 15 minutes until I reached a gas station that was still open, with bright lighting and a few people inside the store. I pulled in without thinking twice. I turned off the engine and sat there for a few seconds, just breathing, trying to calm down. My hands were still tense on the steering wheel. When I went inside, I grabbed a bottle of water and stayed near the counter, looking around as if I needed to confirm that there were actually other people there. I stayed inside the station for quite a while, longer than necessary, just trying to return to normal. There was a cashier and 2 other people at the back, talking quietly near the shelves. It was a normal environment, nothing unusual, but I still felt on edge, looking every time the door opened. At some point, the cashier asked if everything was okay, maybe because I had been standing there for too long without doing anything. I just said I had taken a bad road and needed a moment before continuing. I didn't go into details. I didn't even know how to explain it in a way that would make sense. I stayed a few more minutes, finished the water, and went back to the car. Before leaving, I took one last look around, almost out of habit, as if expecting to see something out of place. But everything was normal. I continued the trip, and this time, stuck only to main roads until I got home. The next day, after getting a few hours of sleep, I started going over everything more calmly. The more I thought about it, the clearer it became that it hadn't been a coincidence. It wasn't just one guy lost on the road and another appearing by chance. Their positioning, the timing of their appearance, the way the one in front didn't react until the last second and the one behind was already coming fast. Everything pointed to them trying to stop me there. I even considered going back during the day to see the place more clearly, but I dismissed that idea immediately. It made no sense to expose myself again out of curiosity. Since then, I completely avoid any shortcuts on dirt roads at night, no matter how much the GPS says it's faster. That night changed that for me permanently. Even today, when I remember the scene in the rearview mirror, that second man appearing out of nowhere behind the car, I still get that same sense of alertness, like I made the only possible choice to get out of there safely. Story 3. I was 42 years old when this happened, and at the time I worked as a truck driver running night routes across the western United States. I lived in Reno, Nevada, but I spent more time inside the truck than at home. That week, I was covering a delayed delivery to a small depot near Ely, crossing a very isolated part of the state. One of those long, straight, empty roads where you can drive for almost an hour without passing another vehicle. I had driven that stretch a few times before, so it wasn't like I was lost or nervous about being there. It was just a normal night on the job. The truck was loaded with boxes of agricultural parts, nothing truly urgent, but the client wanted the shipment before 6 in the morning. I remember leaving a little after 9 at night, with a large coffee in the cup holder, a bag of pretzels on the passenger seat, and that mixed smell of diesel, warm rubber, and old air conditioning that every truck driver knows well. The road that night was quiet in a way that only the interior of Nevada can be. It wasn't just a lack of movement. It was a feeling of complete emptiness. The sky was clear without a strong moon, and the truck's headlights illuminated only that short stretch of asphalt ahead, leaving the rest of the desert completely black. Every now and then, I saw small signs passing quickly, crooked fences, spaced out posts, but nothing that looked like life. The FM radio didn't come in well, so I left the CB on the channel I usually use to listen to other drivers. Normally in that region it was just static or very distant, broken conversations that were hard to understand. Around 1 in the morning, I was starting to feel that heavy fatigue behind my eyes, so I cracked the window open a bit to let in cold air. That's when the radio crackled in a different way, like someone had pressed the transmit button too close to the microphone. The static lasted 2 or 3 seconds, louder than usual, and then a male voice came through. It wasn't like those broken transmissions from a tired trucker. It was too clear, too close, as if the person were inside the cab with me. The first thing he said was, "Can you hear me?" in a low, almost unhurried tone. I instinctively looked at the radio, even knowing that didn't make sense because on that road almost no one used the CB at that hour. I waited a bit longer, thinking it was someone testing the channel or calling another driver, but he repeated it, this time more direct. "I know where you are." That made me frown immediately. I thought it might be some kind of joke, someone who had seen me pass earlier and was trying to scare me. Even so, I didn't respond. I just turned the volume up a little, trying to understand the voice better. A few seconds later, he started describing exactly what was around me. He said something like, "Straight road, wire fence on the right, no cars in sight. You just passed a small fallen sign." And that gave me an immediate sense of discomfort because I really had passed a slightly crooked sign minutes before. It wasn't impossible to guess, but it also wasn't obvious. I looked in the rearview mirror, then to the sides, trying to see any distant headlights, any sign of another vehicle that might be following me. There was nothing. No light, no dust, No sound other than the truck's engine. My body tensed up without me realizing it, especially in my shoulders and neck. I thought about responding on the radio and asking who it was, but something stopped me. It felt wrong to give it attention. The voice went silent for a few seconds after that, and I almost thought it was over. That it was just someone bored trying to scare whoever was on the channel. I even let out a slow breath and adjusted my hand on the wheel, trying to go back to normal. But then the radio crackled again, shorter this time, and he came back, now describing my movements in real time. "You took your foot off the accelerator a bit and you're looking at the mirrors." I felt a cold drop in my stomach instantly. It wasn't generic description anymore. It was too specific. I hadn't even realized I had slowed down until he said it. Instinctively, I looked at the speedometer, then at the dashboard as if that would give me some logical explanation. My first reaction was to think it might be some kind of interference, some equipment picking something up. But it didn't make sense for someone to know exactly what I was doing inside the cab. That's when I started slowing down for real. Not out of rational decision, but because my body just did it on its own. I took my foot off the accelerator and let the truck lose some speed, trying to look further ahead down the road, straining my eyes in the dark. The beam of the headlights seemed even shorter than before, as if the darkness had grown heavier. And then I saw it. Up ahead, right at the edge of the light, there was a car stopped in the middle of the lane. It wasn't on the shoulder. It was slightly angled, blocking part of the road with no headlights on, completely dark. My first instinct was to brake more because it could be someone with a problem, someone needing help. But at the same time, that voice was still fresh in my mind, and before I could make any decision, the radio opened again and he said just one word very calmly. "Now." The moment he said that, I felt as if something squeezed my chest from the inside. It wasn't a quick scare. It was a continuous heavy feeling that froze my thinking for a few seconds. My foot was split between braking more or accelerating, and that never happens to me on the road. I've been driving for years. I know exactly how to react in risky situations. But there I simply froze for a moment. The car ahead had no lights, no signals, nothing indicating someone was trying to ask for help in a normal way. And the fact that that voice had said "now" at the exact moment I was approaching made everything feel wrong, like it was being coordinated. I started to feel my hands sweating on the wheel, even with the cold air coming through the window. Instead of stopping directly behind the car, I decided to pull slightly to the side, partially onto the shoulder, keeping my distance. I didn't turn off the engine or open the door. I just stayed there with the truck running, the headlights pointed at that stopped car. The paint looked dark, maybe gray or black, hard to tell with the light hitting it head on. I tried to see inside, but the windows were too dark. I couldn't see anyone. No movement, no silhouette. I picked up the radio microphone, even pressed the button, but didn't say anything. My breathing was shorter, somewhat uneven. That's when the radio crackled again, but this time the voice didn't speak to me directly. He spoke as if describing an action that hadn't happened yet. "You're going to get out." I didn't get out. The moment he said that, I dropped the microphone and felt a very clear urge to do exactly the opposite. It was almost automatic. I pulled the brake, kept the truck running, but stayed there only a few seconds trying to understand what I was seeing and hearing. Nothing about the car ahead changed. No doors opened, no lights turned on. It was just an object sitting in the middle of the road with no sign of life. I started thinking about all the stories I had heard about roadside traps, people faking breakdowns to stop drivers. But this didn't fully match because no one was trying to be visible. And the radio, none of that made any sense. I ran my hand over my face, feeling the cold sweat on my forehead, and decided I wasn't getting out of the cab no matter what. Without thinking any further, I put the truck in gear and started to go around the car using the shoulder, very slowly at first, keeping the headlights directly on it. My heart was pounding hard enough that I could feel it in my chest. As I got closer, trying to see if there was anyone inside, the radio opened again. The same voice in the same calm, almost indifferent tone said, "You weren't supposed to do that." That hit me harder than anything up to that point. It felt like I had broken an expectation of someone who was actually waiting for a specific reaction from me. I didn't look at the radio this time. I kept my eyes on the road and accelerated a bit more, determined to drive past without stopping for anything. When the truck was side by side with the car, I turned my head just enough to try to see inside, even knowing it might be a terrible idea. The light from my headlights hit the side window, and for a second I could make out something in the driver's seat. It wasn't clear. I couldn't see a face or details, but there was someone there sitting completely still, with their head slightly tilted forward. What caught my attention wasn't even the person itself, but the fact that they didn't react to the strong light or the noise of the truck passing so close. No movement, nothing. I felt a strong chill run up my arms and accelerated straight ahead without looking again. The moment I fully passed the car, the radio opened one more time, but this time the voice was lower, almost as if it were farther away, and said, "Too late." I didn't slow down after that. On the contrary, I accelerated as much as I could on that stretch, keeping the truck steady but trying to put as much distance as possible between me and that situation. I kept looking in the rearview mirror for several seconds, expecting to see the car starting, headlights turning on, any sign that someone was coming after me. But there was nothing, just darkness swallowing the road. The radio went completely silent after that last phrase. No static, no interference, nothing. That made me even more uncomfortable because the silence felt heavy, as if something had simply ended. My hands were still sweaty, and I had to wipe them on my jeans more than once to keep a firm grip on the wheel. I kept driving for another 20 minutes without seeing a single other vehicle. No lights on the horizon, no gas station, nothing. Just road and darkness. Little by little, the adrenaline started to fade, but then came that strange urge to rationalize everything. I started thinking that maybe the guy on the radio was somewhere elevated, watching the road with binoculars or something like that. Or that the stopped car was part of some poorly planned robbery attempt. But the more I thought about it, the less it made sense. How did he know exactly what I was doing inside the cab? How did he speak at the exact moment? I even picked up my phone to see if there was any signal, any message, anything, but it was completely without service, as expected in that region. I just wanted to reach somewhere with people, with light, any sign of normalcy. Eventually, I spotted the faint lights of an old gas station by the roadside. It wasn't much, just 2 pumps, a small shop, and a dim sign. I pulled in without thinking twice and parked the truck near the entrance. I got out quickly, feeling the cold air hit my face, and went straight inside. There was an older attendant behind the counter watching TV at low volume. I asked if there had been anyone else on the road that night, if he had heard anything on the radio, anything unusual. He looked at me a bit confused and said no, that everything was quiet as usual. I mentioned the stopped car a few miles back, and he frowned, saying he hadn't received any calls about a vehicle stopped there that night. That didn't help calm me at all. I stayed inside for a few minutes, trying to decide what to do. Part of me wanted to simply ignore everything and continue the route as if nothing had happened. But another part couldn't let it go, especially the image of the stopped car and the motionless person inside. I ended up asking the attendant if there was a landline to call highway patrol. He pointed to a phone on the wall and said I could use it. I called and explained the situation as directly as possible, without mentioning the radio, because I knew it would sound too strange. I just said there was a car stopped in the middle of the road with no lights, possibly with someone inside, unresponsive. The person on the other end said they would send a unit to check, but that it might take a while because of the distance. I went back to the truck after that, but I didn't turn the radio on again. I left it completely off. The silence inside was better than any risk of hearing that voice again. I sat there looking at the dashboard, trying to calm down, taking a few deep breaths. When I finally got back on the road, I paid attention to every detail, as if anything could happen again. But nothing did. No other stopped car, no voice on the radio, nothing out of the ordinary. Still, that feeling didn't go away. That sense that I had gone through something that didn't have a clear explanation. And worse, that it seemed to depend on my reaction. Story 4. I am 34 years old, and at the time, I was living in Sacramento. I work in outside sales, so I'm used to driving long distances, but almost always during the day. That trip was an exception. I needed to get to a smaller town near Medford for a meeting early the next morning, and since my day had been busy, I only managed to leave late at night. The idea was to drive as much as possible during the early morning hours to get closer and rest for a few hours before the appointment. I had taken long trips before, so I wasn't nervous, just a bit tired. I grabbed coffee, some snacks, filled up the car, and got on the road around 10:30 at night. At first, everything was normal. The road was relatively empty, but cars still passed from time to time, mostly trucks. I had a podcast playing quietly just to keep me awake, with the air conditioning on and the windows closed. The night was cold, the kind you notice when you touch the glass. After about an hour and a half of driving farther away from urban areas, traffic started to drop off significantly. That's when I noticed a car stopped on the shoulder on the right side of the road. It was a dark sedan with no hazard lights on, no one visible inside. I found it strange, but not enough to worry. I just drove past like anyone else would. A few minutes later, maybe 10 or 15, I continued normally, no longer thinking about the car. The road remained very empty, just the constant sound of the tires on the asphalt and the engine holding a steady rhythm. I was already a bit on autopilot, focused only on moving forward. Then, further ahead, I started to see another car stopped on the shoulder. At first, I didn't connect it to the first one, because that's common on long trips. There's always someone pulled over for some reason. But as I got closer, I started to realize it looked very similar. Same model, same dark color, same position, slightly angled toward the shoulder. I passed it and tried to glance quickly to the side, but the windows were too dark to see anything inside. At that moment, I just thought it could be a coincidence. Long roads, similar cars, nothing unusual. Even so, that small feeling of unease stayed with me. I even looked in the rearview mirror for a few seconds after passing, trying to see if it would start moving or if someone would get out. But I saw nothing. I kept driving, trying to distract myself with the podcast again, but I wasn't really paying attention anymore. My focus shifted more to the road and the surroundings. I realized I was gripping the steering wheel a bit tighter than usual, for no clear reason. Still, I kept going, trying to ignore that faint sense that something wasn't quite right. After another 20 minutes or so, feeling more tired, I started looking for a place to stop briefly, even just to stretch my legs and get more coffee. The road was becoming increasingly isolated, with long stretches without any lighting beyond my headlights. Then ahead, I saw yet another car stopped on the shoulder, and this time, there was no way to ignore it. It followed the same pattern. Same model, same dark color, same strange position, slightly angled. I felt an immediate discomfort, stronger than before. It didn't seem like coincidence anymore. It didn't make sense for me to come across 3 practically identical cars in the same situation within a relatively short span. I slowed down a bit without realizing it, trying to observe more closely as I approached. When I passed it, I made a point of looking more carefully. I leaned forward slightly, trying to see through the side window. And again, nothing. No movement, no clear silhouette. Just darkness inside the car. That gave me a knot in my stomach. The kind that doesn't come from immediate fear, but from something that feels out of place. I started thinking about turning around or stopping somewhere with more activity, but there were no options on that stretch. Then I saw a sign indicating a rest stop a few miles ahead. That gave me some relief. At least I would have a lit place with a bathroom and maybe other people. I kept going, trying to stay calm but already paying attention to anything unusual around me. When I pulled into the rest stop, the first thing I did was look around for other cars. The place was simple, with a few parking spaces, dim lighting, and a small building with a bathroom and vending machines. And there, parked a bit farther from the main lights, was the same car. There was no way it was another one. Same color, same model, same slightly crooked position, as if it had been parked in a hurry. My whole body tensed immediately. I was still moving, pulling in slowly, and for a second I thought about just turning around and leaving without stopping. But I was already tired. I needed the bathroom. I needed a minute out of the car. So I parked but chose a spot closer to the light, far from that car. I turned off the engine but didn't get out right away. I sat there for a few seconds, looking through the windshield toward the dark car. No movement, no interior light, no sign of anyone opening a door or shifting. It looked empty, but at the same time it didn't feel abandoned. That strange feeling came back stronger. I grabbed my phone just in case and checked the signal. It was weak, but still there. I took a deep breath, unlocked the door, and stepped out, closing it quickly behind me. The air was colder there, and the silence felt heavy. I walked straight toward the building, trying not to look too much at the car, but it was impossible to ignore that it was there, completely still, as if waiting. Inside the building, the fluorescent light was almost too bright after the darkness outside. The place was empty. No other people, no staff, just the sound of an old fan and the constant hum of the lights. I went straight to the bathroom but couldn't relax. The whole time I kept thinking about that car outside. That repetition made no sense at all. I washed my hands quickly and stood there for a few seconds looking at my own reflection in the mirror, trying to calm myself down. I considered staying inside longer, waiting for someone to show up, but the silence only made things stranger. I decided the best thing was to leave quickly and get out of there. When I opened the door to go out, the first thing I did was look straight at where the car was. It was still in the same place, but this time, something had changed. The headlights were off like before, but I had the clear impression that there was someone in the driver's seat. It wasn't a clear view. I couldn't see a face, but I could make out a shape, a presence. And what bothered me most was that the person seemed to be looking in my direction. I froze for a second, standing in the doorway, feeling my heart race again. I thought about going back inside, but something made me keep walking toward my car, trying to act as if nothing was happening. I walked to my car, trying not to speed up too much, but I could feel my body already on alert. Every sound seemed louder. The sound of my own footsteps on the ground, the slight wind hitting the signs. Everything felt amplified. When I reached the door, I unlocked it quickly and got in almost immediately, closing and locking it right away. Before even putting on my seatbelt, I looked again toward that car. It was still there, but this time I was sure. There was someone inside. A dark silhouette, motionless, positioned behind the wheel. And the worst part was that there was no light inside the car, and yet I could still sense the presence. It was as if the person was just there, watching, with no intention of getting out. I didn't wait any longer. I put the key in, started the car, and shifted into gear immediately. At the exact moment my engine made that initial sound, the headlights of the dark car turned on. It was too instantaneous to be a coincidence. I felt a tightness in my chest right away. It was as if he had been waiting for exactly that. I didn't look directly at him anymore. I just started pulling out of the space, trying to stay in control, without making any sudden moves. But as I turned the wheel to leave the parking area, I saw out of the corner of my eye the other car also beginning to move, slowly pulling out of its spot, aligning behind me. I left the rest stop trying to stay calm, but my hands were already shaking on the wheel. As soon as I got back onto the road, I quickly checked the rearview mirror and saw the headlights of the car behind me, at a distance too close to be coincidence. It wasn't a passing car, it wasn't someone who had already been on the road. It had left with me at the same time, at the same pace. I started to accelerate a bit, just to see if it would keep the distance or fall behind. It maintained exactly the same space, not closer, not farther. That gave me a very bad feeling, because it didn't seem like someone driving normally. It felt like someone following me. I tried to convince myself it could still be a coincidence. Maybe he was heading the same way. Maybe he had stopped there for another reason, but then I did a simple test. I slowed down slightly, on purpose. And he slowed down too. It was subtle, but clear. I felt my stomach drop immediately. I looked in the rearview mirror again, trying to make out some detail, but the headlights were too bright. I couldn't see the car itself, just that constant white light following me. My heart was racing, and I started thinking about what to do. There was no nearby town, no real traffic, just road and darkness. I thought about calling someone, but the phone signal was weak and unstable. Even so, I tried to dial 911, just to have it ready in case I needed it. The call didn't even go through. It dropped before connecting. That made me even more nervous. I tried again, but the phone just kept searching for signal. Meanwhile, the car stayed behind me at the same distance, as if synchronized with every movement I made. I realized I was breathing faster and had to force myself to take a few deep breaths to avoid panicking. I considered speeding up more, trying to create distance, but that road wasn't good for high speed in the dark. One mistake and I could go off the road. Then I saw a small turnoff ahead, one of those secondary roads that almost no one uses. Without thinking much, I signaled and turned. I did it more as a test than with any real plan. The moment I turned, I looked in the rearview mirror and saw the headlights behind me also making the turn. There was no hesitation. He turned with me. That was when the situation stopped feeling uncertain and became certain. This wasn't coincidence. I felt a strong chill in my stomach and a pressure in my chest that nearly took my breath away for a moment. I was being followed and there was no one around to help. The secondary road was even darker than the main one, narrow, with uneven sections and practically no lighting at all. I immediately regretted turning onto it, but there was no way to go back without making a risky maneuver. I kept going, trying to maintain a steady speed, but without taking my eyes off the rearview mirror. The headlights stayed there, steady, at the same distance, no rush, no attempt to pass. That was what bothered me the most. It didn't feel like someone trying to overtake. It felt like someone who just wanted to stay behind me. My body was completely tense, my hands aching from gripping the wheel so tightly. After a few minutes, I saw a slightly more open area ahead, with enough space to turn the car around. That's where I made a somewhat desperate decision. I accelerated a bit more, and when I reached that spot, I turned the wheel sharply, making a quick turn to face the opposite direction and head back toward the main road. The car slipped slightly because of the uneven ground, but I managed to straighten it out. At the exact moment I finished the maneuver and started heading back, I looked ahead, and the headlights that had been behind me were now coming straight toward me. He had turned around too. At that moment I reacted without really thinking. I just acted. Instead of trying to dodge or get back to the main road, I steered slightly to the side, turned off my headlights, and slammed on the brakes until I came to a complete stop. It was a strange impulse, but in my head it made sense at the time. If he was following me visually, maybe I could disappear for a few seconds. As soon as the car stopped, I lowered myself in the seat, staying as low as possible, almost lying down, trying not to make any movement or sound. My heart was beating so hard I was sure it could be heard inside the car. I held my breath for a few seconds, trying to listen to what was happening outside. The headlights came toward me and passed right by. I could see the light sweeping through the interior of my car for a moment, lighting everything up quickly and then continuing forward. I didn't move. I didn't look. I just waited. The sound of the engine continued for a few seconds, then started to fade, until it disappeared completely. I stayed there for at least a minute, maybe more, without the courage to lift my head. When I finally turned the headlights back on and looked at the road, there was nothing. No light, no car, no sign that anyone had passed through besides me. I got back onto the main road as quickly as I could and drove until I found the first place with activity, which was a gas station near a larger town. I didn't stop anywhere isolated after that. I completed the trip, reached my destination, had the meeting, but my mind wasn't there. Even today, what bothers me the most isn't just the fact that I was followed. It's the feeling that that car wasn't simply following me. It felt like it only truly started acting when I stopped, as if it had been waiting for that exact moment. Story 5. I was 27 years old when this happened, and at the time I lived near Macon. I worked in a logistics warehouse on the afternoon shift until late at night, so it was common for me to leave after 10, sometimes close to 11. On that specific day I had stayed longer because a shipment was delayed, so I ended up leaving close to midnight. I was tired, one of those days when you just want to get home, eat something, and sleep. To avoid a busier stretch of highway, I usually took a secondary road that cut through a more rural area. It was a shorter route, but much emptier, with little lighting and practically no traffic at that hour. The road was completely dark that night. There were no streetlights, no nearby houses, just trees and open fields that disappeared into the darkness. My car was simple, nothing special, and the headlights only illuminated enough for me to see the road ahead. I had the radio on low, almost just as background noise, and the window slightly open because the air inside the car felt stuffy. I remember feeling that strange countryside silence, where it seems like there's absolutely nothing around. I had taken that route many times, so I wasn't scared, just somewhat alert because of the hour. Then, after about 15 minutes of driving, I saw a quick movement coming from the right side of the road. At first I thought it was some animal crossing like a deer or a dog, so I automatically took my foot off the accelerator. But instead of crossing the road, whatever it was came straight toward the car. That's when I realized it was a man. He came running out of the shoulder, somewhat clumsy, heading straight for my window. I braked harder by reflex without even thinking, and the car slowed quickly. Before I even came to a complete stop, he was already beside me, banging hard on the driver's window. The sound was loud, sharp, repetitive, like someone truly desperate. I was startled, the kind that makes your whole body freeze for a second. He started speaking quickly, almost stumbling over his words. "Please, let me in. Please help me. There's someone behind me." His voice sounded nervous, out of breath, like he had been running. I could partially see his face, lit by my own headlights reflecting off the side of the car. He looked to be in his early 30s, sweaty, with a tense expression. He kept banging on the window, insisting, asking me to unlock the door. My first reaction was hesitation. It could have been someone truly in danger, but at the same time, the way he appeared out of nowhere on that empty road had already put me on alert. I didn't unlock the door. I just kept looking, trying to understand the situation. That's when I looked over his shoulder, more out of instinct than conscious thought. At first, I didn't see anything. Just darkness, trees, and the empty shoulder. But when I strained my eyes, trying to see beyond the reach of the headlights, I noticed a second silhouette, further back, a few meters away, partially hidden in the shadows. Another man, standing still, motionless. He wasn't running, wasn't shouting, didn't seem panicked. He was just there, watching. That didn't match what the man at my window was saying. If someone were truly chasing him, they wouldn't just stand there like that. At that moment, something clicked in my mind very clearly. The desperation in his voice seemed real, but the situation didn't match. My body reacted before any deeper thought. I kept the doors locked, took my foot off the brake, and pressed the accelerator hard. The man at the window hit the glass one more time, harder, as if trying to stop me from leaving, but I was already moving. The car sped off, and in the rearview mirror I saw him quickly falling behind. And for a moment I could see both of them together, the one at my window and the one who had been further back, now moving in the same direction, as if there was no longer any need to hide. I didn't slow down after that. On the contrary, I accelerated as much as the road allowed without losing control. My heart was racing, and I felt a mix of adrenaline and a constant cold feeling in my stomach. I kept looking in the rearview mirror, expecting to see headlights appear, a car coming after me, any sign that they were trying to follow. But there was nothing, just the empty, dark road. Even so, the sense of danger didn't go away. My body stayed tense, as if someone was still nearby. I realized I was gripping the steering wheel so tightly that my fingers started to hurt. After a few minutes, I began trying to understand what had just happened. The most obvious explanation was that it was an attempt to make me stop and unlock the door. His desperation seemed convincing, but the presence of the other man, standing still and hidden, changed everything. It didn't seem like someone genuinely asking for help. It seemed staged. And what bothered me the most was thinking about what would have happened if I had opened the door. I imagined that situation in my head, both of them beside the car, me vulnerable inside, and it sent a chill through me. I kept driving for quite a while without seeing anyone at all. No cars coming the other way, no distant headlights, nothing. That road felt even more isolated after what happened. I tried turning the radio on just to have some sound in the car, but I ended up turning it off again because I couldn't focus on anything. My mind kept going back to the image of the two men, especially the second one, the one standing further back. The way he didn't move, just watched, bothered me far more than the man banging on the window. It was as if he was there just to make sure everything went as planned. After about 20 minutes, I finally started to see signs of a more active area, some distant lights, poles, then a few houses. That gave me immediate relief. I didn't stop at the first opportunity, but I gradually slowed down, trying to return to normal. When I saw an open gas station with some people and cars, I pulled in without thinking twice. I parked near the entrance, turned off the car, and sat there for a few seconds, just breathing. My hands were still slightly shaking. I looked around, seeing normal people talking, fueling up. and it almost felt strange after what I had just experienced. I got out of the car and went straight inside the store, more out of instinct to be near other people than because I actually needed anything. I grabbed a bottle of water just to have an excuse to stay inside for a few minutes. There was a young attendant at the register and another guy picking something from the shelf. Nothing out of the ordinary. I thought about mentioning what had happened, but in that moment it felt hard to explain without sounding strange. So I just paid, stayed near the door for a while, looking outside, watching every car that came and went. None of them seemed suspicious. No sign of those two men. After a few minutes, I started to feel a bit calmer. Not completely, but enough to go back to the car. Before getting in, I looked around more carefully this time. Everything seemed normal. I got in, locked the doors immediately, and started the engine. I sat there for a few seconds, just looking in the rearview mirror, gathering the courage to get back on the road. I thought about taking a longer, busier route, but it would delay me quite a bit. Even so, at that moment, time didn't seem that important. I just wanted to avoid anything like that happening again. I ended up deciding not to go back to that secondary road. Instead, I took the longer route along the main highway, even knowing it would take more time to get home. At that point, it wasn't worth the risk. The highway had more traffic, more lighting, more chance of someone being around if something went wrong. As I drove, I still checked the rear-view mirror frequently, even knowing that no one was likely following me. It was more of an automatic reaction than anything else. My body hadn't fully relaxed yet. I got home much later than usual, but without any further incident. I parked, went inside, and locked the door behind me more carefully than usual. That night, it took me a while to fall asleep. My mind kept going back to the scene, replaying everything, trying to find some explanation that would make it less unsettling. But the truth is, the more I thought about it, the clearer it became that it wasn't random. What stayed with me the most wasn't the man asking for help. It was realizing that he wasn't alone, and that the request for help seemed like nothing more than a way to get me to open the door. Story 6. I was 39 years old when this happened, and at the time I worked maintaining industrial equipment, traveling frequently between smaller cities. I lived in Salem, and that week I needed to attend a client in a more remote area near Bend. Since the job ran late, I only managed to leave at night, around 10. I was tired, but nothing unusual for that kind of work. I entered the address into my phone's GPS, placed it on the dashboard mount, and started following the suggested route. At first, it directed me along the main highway, then through a few secondary roads. Nothing I hadn't done before. After about an hour of driving, the GPS suggested an alternate route, saying it would save around 20 minutes. I didn't know the area well, but I trusted it. It told me to leave the highway and enter a narrower road with little lighting. Up to that point, it still seemed normal. Rural areas in Oregon are like that. But as I continued, the road became increasingly isolated. First, the houses disappeared, then the few streetlights. It was just road, tall trees on both sides, and the constant sound of tires on uneven asphalt. I started to find it strange, but kept going, glancing at the map from time to time to confirm I was still on the route. After a few minutes, the asphalt simply ended and turned into a dirt road. That immediately put me more on alert, because it wasn't common for the GPS to send me that way at that time of night. Still, the car could manage it, so I continued slowly. The headlights illuminated only a few meters ahead, and everything else was completely dark. The trees seemed closer now, closing in on the road, and the path became narrower, with sections where barely one car could pass at a time. I reduced my speed significantly, avoiding holes and rocks, already starting to question whether this was really the best route. That's when I began to notice that there were no longer any references around me. No houses, no fences, no sign that anyone used that road frequently. I couldn't even clearly see recent tire tracks. I looked at the GPS again, expecting it to tell me to turn back or correct the route, but it didn't. It kept showing the path as if everything were normal. That gave me a bad feeling, the kind you can't quite explain, but you know something isn't right. Even so, I kept going a bit further, thinking it might just be a short stretch before returning to a better road. After a few more minutes, the road became so narrow that there was barely any space to maneuver easily. Tree branches started brushing lightly against the sides of the car, making a dry, irregular sound that increased the sense of isolation even more. I slowed down further, almost stopping at some points just to get through. That's when I realized it had gone too far. It didn't make sense to keep going. Even if it was a shortcut, it didn't seem like a used path. I decided to turn around right there before it got worse. I looked for a slightly wider spot to try to maneuver. It wasn't ideal, but it was enough to attempt it in 2 or 3 moves. I put the car in reverse slowly, turning the wheel carefully to avoid going off the road. It was at that moment, with the car partially sideways, that I saw a light appear behind me. Headlights. I stopped immediately, trying to understand where it had come from. I hadn't seen any car behind me the entire way, and now suddenly there was a vehicle there, stopped, exactly on the only way out. The headlights were pointed directly at my car, too strong for me to see anything beyond the light. I stayed completely still for a few seconds, the car still slightly angled across the road, trying to make sense of the situation. My first thought was that it could be someone else using that road, maybe a local resident. But that didn't make much sense. I hadn't seen any entrance, any house, nothing that indicated someone lived nearby, and the way the car had stopped, it didn't seem like someone who had just arrived and was waiting for me to finish maneuvering. It stopped blocking the exit exactly. It didn't move closer, didn't flash its lights, didn't do anything. It just stayed there, headlights on, pointed straight at me. I felt my body tense immediately, especially in my shoulders and neck. My hands tightened on the steering wheel, and I noticed my breathing had become shorter. I thought about reversing again, trying to move further to the side and make space, but there wasn't much room to go. One wrong move and I could leave the road entirely. Then I glanced at the GPS, almost by reflex, maybe expecting it to recalculate and give me another way out. And that's exactly what happened. The screen changed quickly, recalculating, but when it finished, it no longer showed a way back. Just a line continuing forward, deeper into that road, with a simple instruction: continue straight. That gave me a very bad feeling, the kind you can't ignore. I looked again at the screen, thinking it might be some reading error, loss of signal, something like that. But no, the map was stable, the GPS working, yet it simply no longer considered the way back as an option. It was as if the path behind me no longer existed. I slowly raised my eyes and looked again at the headlights ahead. The car remained in the same position, not moving forward, not backing up, giving no sign of who was inside. I tried to see a silhouette, some movement, but the strong light made it impossible to see anything beyond the glare. I stayed there for a few seconds, trying to think calmly. The most logical option would be to wait for the other driver to move, maybe give me space. But something about that silence bothered me. No horn, no attempt to communicate. Nothing. I considered opening the window and saying something, but immediately dismissed it. It didn't feel safe. Then, almost without realizing it, I started to release the brake and let the car move slowly forward, in the opposite direction of that vehicle. I wasn't sure what I was doing. I just knew I didn't want to stay there, trapped between that and a road that clearly didn't seem normal. I kept moving forward slowly, trying to maintain control of the car on that rough road while the GPS calmly repeated, "Continue straight." The voice was neutral, automatic, but in that context it sounded wrong, almost out of place. I kept checking the rearview mirror every few seconds, expecting to see the car behind me move, try to give way, anything. But it didn't move. It stayed exactly where it was, completely blocking the exit. Gradually, its headlights grew smaller in the mirror until they disappeared completely into the darkness. The further I went, the worse the road became. It was no longer just uneven dirt. There were sections with larger rocks, deep holes, and parts that looked like no one had driven through in a long time. My car began to shake more, and I had to reduce my speed significantly to avoid damaging it. The silence around me was heavy, broken only by the sound of the engine and the impact of the tires against the ground. I began to feel a constant pressure in my chest, as if I were going somewhere I wasn't supposed to be. And the strangest part was that the GPS continued to function perfectly, as if all of it were a normal route. After a few more minutes, the road opened up slightly, but not in a way that made me feel any safer. It wasn't a better road, it was just a wider space without trees so close, like a clearing in the middle of nowhere. I slowed down even more, almost stopping, trying to understand where I had ended up. There were no buildings, no fences, no lights. Just dirt, a few shrubs, and the dark sky above. I looked at the GPS again, expecting it to finally recalculate something different, but no. The same straight line, the same instruction. Continue straight. That's when I decided to stop the car completely. I applied the brake and stayed there for a few seconds in silence, trying to think clearly. My first instinct was to turn off the GPS, remove the phone from the mount, and try to use it manually to see the overall map. When I did that, the screen froze for a second before updating. And when it updated, it no longer showed any road around me. Just a dark background with a dot indicating my location, completely isolated, as if I were outside any mapped route. That gave me an immediate sense of discomfort, stronger than anything before. I stared at the screen for a few seconds, trying to understand if it was just a loading error. I zoomed in and out, dragged the map, but nothing appeared. No roads, no names, nothing. Just that dot sitting in the middle of empty space. My body was completely tense now, and I started to feel that kind of anxiety that comes when you realize you don't have control of the situation. I slowly raised my head and looked around. The darkness felt even heavier in that open space. There was no sound except a light wind and the engine still running. Then, looking further ahead, I saw something that hadn't been there before. At the edge of the headlight's reach, there seemed to be another road, even narrower, almost like a trail. I hadn't seen it when I arrived. There were no clear marks indicating it was used. It was just an opening in the terrain, leading even deeper into that isolated area. Before I could decide anything, the phone vibrated lightly in the mount. The GPS came back, and the route now followed exactly that new path with the same instruction as always. Continue straight. I didn't follow it. At that moment, something inside me completely shut down. I turned off the GPS, removed the phone from the mount, and placed it on the passenger seat. I didn't want to hear that voice anymore, nor see that route. I reversed carefully, trying to retrace exactly the path I had taken. It took time, it was difficult, I had to go very slowly, but I managed. It took me almost half an hour to get out of that dirt stretch and return to the asphalt road. And when I finally got back, I stopped the car for a few minutes just to breathe. To this day, what bothers me most isn't even the fact that the GPS led me to the wrong place. It's remembering that at the moment I tried to turn back, someone was already there behind me, blocking the way out. And even after I managed to leave, the GPS never showed that route again. Not that night and not afterward.
Thank you very much for your company until the end. Your support is what gives life to this channel. If these stories have caught you, don't forget to leave your like and comment on your opinion. And if you are not yet part of our community, sign up now to receive the next real horror stories.